Illinois faces some big challenges. Today, we're about to hear a truly honest analysis of the problems we face. Equally as important, you'll also hear an in-depth discussion of some practical solutions. This is your radio source for stories, the insight, and the answers you won't hear anywhere else. Not in the media and not coming from Springfield. You're listening to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Now, here's your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft, welcome to this edition of Illinois Rising. This week, my co-host, Austin Berg. He's a writer for the Illinois Policy Institute. He's also a columnist for the Illinois News Network. And Austin, in the week that was, one piece of legislation the governor decided to sign was decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana. This doesn't set well with some more conservative pro-family types. But it seems to be a trend. We saw the city of Chicago do something like that. So we're moving from treating it as a misdemeanor to treating it as a violation of like an administrative ordinance. Effectively, it's $100 to $200 fines, less than 10 ounces, I think, was the
10 grams.
10 grams, excuse me. You can see how immersed I am in the drug culture. 10 grams was the threshold. So the question is, good policy, bad policy, honest policy?
Well, we could talk about the framing of sort of the debate later in terms of honesty, but yeah, I think it's good policy. It's going to save the state $15 million over the next 3 years, and you can use criminal justice resources towards crimes that actually have a victim instead of victimless crimes like this. But I'd be interested in speaking with David Kamek and his perspective in terms of his position as a defense attorney.
Well, you're fortunate because we have David Kamek on the line now. He is an Aurora-based defense attorney and senior fellow at the Illinois Policy Institute. David, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You're also a former police officer in suburban Aurora, so that should be noted. So with your law enforcement background as somebody who's been on the streets dealing with drugs and drug-related crime, what's your reaction to the governor's decision?
I'm very pleased. And in fact, I don't think it went quite far enough. But for the most part, people who deal with these cases on a regular basis, the prosecution of small amounts of marijuana are never considered very important by the prosecutors. Not that they suggest some crimes are more important than others, but it's very minor. Move these folks in and out of the courtroom. There's lots of counties that have diversion programs or drug classes to result in the dismissal. What this does is actually gives folks possessing small amounts of cannabis a way to keep their record clear and eventually get it expunged.
And any issue with the idea of kind of repeat offenders, much the way that if I get any number of speeding tickets, the penalties increase. What about to those that are repeatedly caught, even with small amounts of marijuana? It's
still marijuana. It's not a lot of danger to anyone else unless you're driving. And even if you're driving, you have to have a certain amount in your system before you're impaired. And even how much that is a little bit of a disagreement between the experts. I don't think that's a problem at all.
Well, but from the those who are not fans of walking down the path towards legalization, the point is that these people are repeat consumers of a product that is not legal for non-medical reasons in Illinois, and so you're fueling the drug dealers and the drug industry, not just this recreational use that you see as harmless. What about that?
Well, I guess if you believe that any use of a drug fuels a drug kingpin and fuels the illicit sale of larger narcotics, there's nothing I could say that could change your mind. I don't think it's based in reality, but there's nothing I could say that could change your mind because there are people who share small amounts of marijuana between themselves, people who grow in their backyards or get it from friends. They're not all tied to drug kingpins. And specifically, what they're talking about is what was a Class C or Class B misdemeanor, small amounts, less than 10 grams. If you have a dealer, they can still be charged with a felony. If you possess it with intent to deliver it, you can still be charged with a felony. Those tools are still there.
I'd also like to add, if we're worried about kingpins, we should be sort of having the legalization conversation, because with decrim, while I do believe this is going to improve the lives of a lot of people and it's going to save the state's criminal justice system a lot of money, you have with decrim, you may have an increase in demand without a consummate increase in supply, right? You don't want that money to go to an underground market. You want it to be above ground, right?
Oh, look, if you're asking me, should small amounts of marijuana be allowed for sale with certain amount of regulations? I think that's probably a good idea. But that's going down a different path that clearly the legislature and the governor wasn't interested in going down.
Yeah, but this is the path we're on, right? I mean, part of my problem with this whole debate is the dishonesty of it. So we introduced the medical marijuana because we just want to make sure we can provide marijuana to people who derive a medical benefit from like glaucoma patients. But for some reason, we need 21 dispensaries in Illinois to deal with glaucoma patients. Obviously, it was a lie. It was the baby step on the path to legalization, a la Colorado or Washington State. And now we're to the next stage now, which is the decriminalization for small amounts. And at some point, when the political climate, I guess, is favorable enough, when the money's been counted and we could make more, then we'll continue to have Illinois be a gambling and drug-based economy, like a crime family, and we'll take the next step. And so if you want to have the conversation about, and I'm not putting this on you, David, I'm just saying largely the political class in the state, if you want to have a conversation about decriminalization, let's have it, but let's be honest about what we're talking about rather than this kind of incrementalism with specious arguments at every step of the way.
You know, and I'm glad you're not putting it on me because I don't think we're running a drug-based or gambling-based economy. I will concede with you that for some reason in this state, we don't fully fund the criminal justice system. So we have to find backwards ways to fund the criminal justice system. If you're going to enforce the laws, if you're going to send people to jail and to prison, it's an expensive proposition. You have to have taxes in place to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do it on the backs of motorists charged with a speeding ticket who now the court costs have gone up. You can't do it on the backs of people, first offenders who are charged in low-level crimes, and the fines and costs don't necessarily reflect the crime they're accused of. You have to fully fund the system, and we do not do that in this state.
We don't fully fund any system.
Well,
we don't.
That's
exactly
the way we operate.
And I would also say, this notion that we should sort of, as liberty-minded people, be getting away from this notion of this as a revenue grab. Of course, there's going to be political dishonesty in any political debate in Illinois. This is not unique in that respect. I think, this issue is about human beings going to jail and costing people $22,000 a year for them to go to jail, and them having a record that prevents them from being productive citizens the rest of their life. I think that's the debate we should have, regardless of whether politicians are being dishonest about their intentions.
Oh, I agree. Have we expanded sealing and expunging? Yes. Have we gone far enough? No. It is true that whenever the legislature's in session trying to fix something, they're hurting something else. I agree with you 100%. But in terms of small amounts of marijuana, these are, for the most part, college kids and folks like that. These are not your drug dealers that we're trying to protect or legitimize here. No, it's small kids who got caught up in it. And we don't need to punish them any more than we already do.
Right, and I think this is where I go back again to say, let's have an honest conversation about alternative sentencing and drug treatment. I mean, to the extent that that's something as extensive as that is needed, but treat it as a health issue and not so much an incarceration issue. That's just a different conversation than we're having, and it just I want to foster that conversation in an honest way, so that people can come to honest determinations about it and influence the legislators accordingly.
And I would add that I was speaking to just a few months ago James Glasgow, who's the prosecutor who put Drew Peterson in jail, and this guy is the consummate prosecutor. He's got a pinstripe suit, slicked back hair, he's got a gray mustache. He's a gruff guy, and he will say straight up, because he instituted a drug court program wherein you can divert low-level offenders into actual treatment there in his county, in Will County in Joliet. And he says simply, this does not work. Locking these people up doesn't work. It's a waste. We tried it over and over and over again, and it ends up producing worse outcomes than the drug use in the first place.
No, I applaud him for that. I applaud it for the other counties that have adopted similar programs. We can't lock away everyone who's charged with a crime. If you want to think of just tie it to prohibition. Before prohibition, there was an extreme amount of alcohol abuse in the country. I understand where it came from. I understand that after prohibition, legalization rules were put in, like you have to be 21 to drink. We're moving in that direction with marijuana, I hope, where we realize that some recreational use is not so offensive to society that we can't tolerate it.
All right, he is David Kamek, and he's an Aurora-based defense attorney and senior fellow at the Illinois Policy Institute, a former Aurora police officer, past president of the Kane County Bar Association, so someone steeped in law enforcement in a variety of roles. David, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to be there.
And, one thing, though, just on this whole political argument and how politicians. So this fascinating thing where we continue to pile on taxes on tobacco and restrictions on tobacco because we don't want anybody to use it, except we've already budgeted for and spent the money we expect to realize from the sale of tobacco from people using it. So we actually do want people to use it, and it's government pitted against the citizen. So on the one hand, the politicians don't have the guts to ban tobacco, and they don't have the guts to legalize marijuana, and the common denominator is what?
They don't want people hooked on drugs, but they want schools to be hooked on money that we get from the drugs.
Right, exactly. So it's about the money, and as H.L. Mencken famously said, when somebody tells you it's not about the money, what they mean is it's about the money.